Okay.
Okay.
Right. I'd like to welcome Marike from Australia, who has fibromyalgia. Welcome, Marike.
Thank you for letting me talk about this. I think it is very important. My full name, if you want to know that, but you can't practice it, is
Okay.
Marijke Groothuis.
Which you told me is a Dutch name.
It is very Dutch. I was born in Holland. I lived there until I was 24, and then I migrated to Australia. Now I live in a tiny little country town after having tried Melbourne, and I love it. I've got 7 acres of land here, and it's beautiful.
7 acres, wow. I wouldn't like to mow your lawn.
I don't either. The sheep do it for me.
Also, you have sheep as well. Yeah.
I know the farmer down below has the sheep and he would like to use my land, so I thought, well, yeah.
Oh, that's good, isn't it? You,
Yeah, it helps both of us.
yes, yeah. So, when were you diagnosed with fibromyalgia?
Well, formally diagnosed in 2008. I must have had this for much, much longer, but it started to come to a head in 2007 when I picked up a virus from somewhere. And I still remember being at open day at the university, and I just could not move from one chair to another without being totally exhausted.
Mm.
And this is when the whole series of tests started and investigations, and it wasn't until a year later that a specialist in Geelong actually did this test, the tender points.
Right.
What do you call them? And all 18 of them are reacted to.
Wow.
And so that's when we sort of began the saga of trying to work out what would work for me as far as drugs was concerned. And I went from pillar to post with it. They gave me everything under the sun and nothing worked. And I was given antidepressants, which I objected to because I wasn't depressed. Everything.
What were your symptoms at that time?
Before 2007, I always had pains in my muscles, in my joints. I was reasonably tired. I thought everyone was tired because I had a pretty full life.
Oh.
But I was more tired than most people. By the time 7 o'clock came every night, there was no life for me anymore. I was waiting for the time that I could go to bed so I could actually try and sleep. Sleeping patterns were totally up the creek. And I thought originally it started to happen more frequently that I couldn't sleep properly after I had my first child. But as it has turned out, now I've been taking the LDN. Well, it had nothing to do with it. I can sleep long hours in one go,
Mhm.
but I need to have the right drug for it.
So, how did you find LDN?
I think now, and I need to explain this. At the moment, I'm not on it because I broke my ankle over the Christmas holidays, and there was initially a problem with getting operated on, and just as well I discussed LDN with the anesthetist. They had to take the LDN out of my body first before they could give me a proper anesthetic. And this involved the raising of the blood pressure to a dangerously high level, etc. All sorts of things had to happen. And I was advised then, because I was given morphine to take later, that it would be best not to take the LDN. Right? And so I have not been on it because I'll come back to that later, but there's been a snowball effect of all sorts of things that have happened since I broke that ankle.
Mhm.
But now, not having the chance to take it or have taken it, I now fully realize what the benefits are. I already knew that it helped me, but I couldn't because it was so gradually that all the symptoms began to disappear. I could not say for sure that, yes, this was better, that was better, that was better. I slept better. I
Mhm.
had less pain. Um, my concentration, which was very important for me, I'm a university lecturer, and I found myself simply hit by fibro fog at the most inopportune times. And I would stand in front of a whole lecture hall of students, and I would feel like an idiot because suddenly, everything was gone.
Mm.
It would last, not very long, but it was enough to make me really stressed.
Yes.
With the LDN, that all began to settle down. Now I look back on it, and the pain, by the way, is back with a vengeance. That has also got a lot to do with Ross River virus that I contracted a little while ago. My sleeping patterns at the moment, I'm back to where I was with an hour and a half sleeping, suddenly waking as if someone had tapped me on the shoulder and I needed to do something really urgently. I would then lie in bed for another hour before I could fall back to sleep again. And then again, an hour and a half later, I would be awake again. And I just could not get a good pattern going there.
Yeah.
3 days after taking the first lot of LDN, I slept for 4 hours in a row, and I've never felt so good in my life. And from that point on, I got it up to 8 hours a night. And it was beautiful waking up of a morning, stepping out of bed and not having to stand there for a minute or so to feel the pain sort of go away in my feet or in my ankles or in my knees. I could just get out of bed. I could start walking without holding on to anything. And it was brilliant. So I'm just holding out at the moment for returning to taking LDN. And I spoke to my doctor yesterday morning, and he thinks it's okay to try it, but we need to control it very, very carefully. So observe what is happening and write journals, etc. But
Yes. Are you one of those people with fibromyalgia that are very sensitive to all drugs?
I am. I think I've always been sensitive to any drug. This is one of the reasons why I've rejected a lot of drugs that people said I should be on. I had for a long time thought that what I was feeling was what my mother described as, and my grandmother for that matter, described as rheumatism. And I'm beginning to see a pattern emerge here. What has happened to me was happening to my mother, but my grandmother had the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see my mother still in front of me, coming out of bed, doing exactly what I was doing before I got the LDN.
Mm-hmm.
And it is trying to get the body to work.
Mm. What dose did you start on when you initially started LDN?
Straight away to 4.5. We didn't go low. I've been reading up on whatever was there at the internet, and I could see sort of a pattern emerge that people gradually got to the 4.5 anyway. And I thought, this is experimental. My doctor had sort of agreed that I can take it, but 3 months and then we would review it. And I thought, well, to give it a good go, it is a low dose to begin with. 4.5 seems to be where most people seem to settle that had actually entered something in the database.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I asked for that, and we discussed it, and he said, well, let's see what it does. And as I said, the first night, I really, after taking it, I really couldn't feel very much. And it was not a major, oh my God, this is so good. Mm-hmm. It was a very gradual removal of all the pain, of all the things that were bothering me, of the fibro fog. It wasn't a cure. It isn't a cure.
No.
But it helps me live the way I want to live. Mm. Right? I've got a lovely garden here, and I wanted to work in that. But gradually, I could do less and less and less. I remember when I first came here, it's about 7 years ago, that first 6 weeks of summer of my holidays, I just reorganized the entire backside of the garden. I dug and made beds and did everything, and it was great. I was at a good period at the time. Mm-hmm. And then 3 years later, I look back on that and I thought, I don't understand how I've ever been able to do that, because I could really lift anything.
Mm. your own GP prescribed the LDN for you?
Yes,
And was it?
I discussed this with him. I gave him the websites that I'd been looking at, and he said, "I'm going away over the weekend. I will look at it all." He said, and then we'll discuss it again. So he didn't say immediately, "Yes, you can have it."
Yes. Hmm.
He wanted to know more about it because he didn't know that it was
Yeah.
being used for
Hmm.
fibromyalgia. He had heard of fibromyalgia, which was a plus.
Was it difficult to get the prescription filled at a pharmacy?
It was a bit difficult, but it had nothing to do with the prescription. It had everything to do with what was going on in Australia at the time with scripts. When a doctor in Victoria prescribed you something, you can only fill that prescription in Victoria.
Right.
If they prescribed it in New South Wales, you could only get it in New South Wales.
Hmm.
So it was really state-based, all these prescriptions. And then in July 2008, they changed all that, and you could now fill that script anywhere in Australia. And by that stage, I'd already found a compounding pharmacy in Adelaide
Hmm.
that was promising me that they would send it within 24 hours. I would have it. So I thought, well, that's great, because the others, there was one in Melbourne, said something about, well, it could be a week, could be a week and a half, and I didn't get a really good answer out of him. So I've sent the script off to these people via email, actually, scanned it in. And within 24 hours, I had my 3 month supply of LDN, and I began to take.
Hmm. So, what would you say to other people with fibromyalgia who are thinking of trying LDM?
Oh, try it. Just try it. Give it a 3 month trial, definitely.
Hmm.
And you find, right, what I started to do, because it was a slow sort of change in everything that was happening. I kept a diary, and I would write down how I felt when I went to bed, and I would write down how I felt when I woke up, and then after I had had my lunch, I would write down a few things about what I was feeling at the time. And I could actually see that the tiredness that I experienced was getting less and less. I still got tired,
Hmm.
but I wasn't exhausted anymore, right? And the pain was still, I could still feel that there was some pain there, but I could live with that. There's a certain level of pain that you can get used to.
Yes.
Once it gets beyond that level, though, it starts to interfere with your everyday, things that you need to do.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things that I noticed, that I could do more things per day than I was previously doing without getting tired.
Mm. So a
And
big,
uh, very gradually, I got back even to exercising on the treadmill. I couldn't even walk on it because my ankles were so sore.
but there is a big difference in being tired and being fatigued, isn't there? A really
Oh,
big
oh
difference.
yes, oh yes. The fatigue is something, I always compare it with, fatigue is something that makes you sort of drag yourself
Mm.
around. Whereas tiredness is a sort of, it's almost a sort of satisfaction. You're tired, but you know why.
Yes.
You, you have been working at something, and but the fatigue would strike, and that fibrophobe, that really upset me most. That I could not, for the life of me, sometimes I couldn't even tell you what my name was for a few seconds.
Mm.
And it felt exactly the same as what I used to have prior to getting a migraine attack. That very, very early sort of warning system that was in place then also made me sort of sit down, do nothing, because I couldn't do anything anymore.
Mm.
And this fibrophobe would stop me right in the middle of what I was doing. And for a while I thought, I was suffering from early onset dementia. But
On the,
because that was so quickly gone, and I would remember it,
mm.
the doctor said to me, no, it couldn't be that.
Well, I used to have a similar thing. I mean, I've got MS, but I had the same thing with fog in the head where I couldn't think of words,
Mm.
vocabulary, anything. And
Mm.
I also thought I was going to, have senile dementia of some form or other,
Yeah,
which is quite scary, isn't it? And it must be an
it
awful
is.
illness to go through. Once you've completely lost it, then I should
Mm.
think you don't mind. But it's that
It,
realizing you're losing
yeah,
it, that is really, really scary.
yes, it
Well,
is.
I
And
hope that you, sorry.
it's not until people actually have experienced that they fully begin to realize what it is that we're talking about.
Yes. Yes, it's like trying to explain a migraine to somebody who's never had one. It's not like a headache, is
Impossible.
it? Very difficult to explain.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story, and I hope that you're soon able to get back onto LDN and have the results you had before.
Yes, now you might be able to tell me this. Does LDN interfere with blood thinners? Because they established a 21 centimeter blood clot in my leg.
Right. I've
And
been, sorry.
I don't, I'm a bit, I'm a bit concerned that, it might do something that prevents the blood from thinning as it
Right.
should.
If you can tell me what drug it is you're having, I can certainly ask and get that checked out for you. But I know that a lot of people who have had CCSVI, who've had stents put in, who've had to have warfarin to thin the blood, are
Mm.
still taking LDN.
That's good because I am taking warfarin. I was on heparin and then warfarin was added to it. Now they're hoping to bring it back to just warfarin.
Right. But if you
So
put the details in an email for me, I'll get that checked for you.
I will.